So Myrath are back with their newest album, Wilderness of Mirrors. This basically just released yesterday, so brand new. I've listened to it about 3 times. I would have liked a bit more time to listen to it, but the sooner you get a review out, the more numbers you usually get. So 3 times, and I'm just going to jump into it. So Myrath are Tunisian metalers, prog metal really, even though you could technically use the prog metal sparingly. Myrath basically started as prog metal, but then the issue is that they basically did 2 albums which was prog metal with some kind of like Tunisian kind of like elements thrown in there to give them that unique kind of sounds that the band have. Then on their 3rd album, they kind of took that prog metal thing out and instead focused on being a bit more kind of like mainstream. It was still prog with the Tunisian kind of effect and everything, but as I said, it was just a bit more simplified. And then, as I said, moving on with Legacy, that went to being a little bit more kind of hot metal type of thing. Very influenced in the Tunisian style and everything. Certain tracks actually having their native language in there, just to basically just give that kind of, again, Tunisian atmosphere to the album. And then they just kind of continued along them lines, going into the likes of Shahili, which pretty much followed in suit. And then you also then got their last album, Karma, I believe it was called, where basically they stripped even more out. So even though they've technically been still labelled as prog, even though they follow a pretty typical formula of verse, chorus, and I've stuck to that, the only thing making them proggy, I guess, is just the Tunisian elements that they've thrown in. But outside of that, basically just kind of typical. They have some guitar solos, they have a good vocalist, they have decent keys in there, they're very orchestral, with violins and all sorts of native kind of instruments, just give them that, big anthemic kind of arena kind of sound, very orchestral, cinematic. So I said, even though following the basics formula, they do still have quite an expansive kind of soundscape. But on their previous album, Karma, they decided to kind of put the majority of that out and kind of just go with, we're now just going to focus on just mainstream metal, and that's it. Tunisian native language, pretty much gone. The Tunisian sound that Myrath is known for, their signature sound, gone. It was more just typical metal, some 80s metals vibes thrown in there, just typical metal, following your simplistic formula again. So basically you got a very simplistic album, still with solos, but again lacking that prog side to them. So with Wilderness of Mirrors, I kind of just thought Myrath would just basically just go into what they have been doing for the past couple of years now, which is basically still following this mainstream kind of structuring, but having that Tunisian kind of soundscape with being very kind of cinematic, anthemic and everything, Tunisian, but still very simplistic, very straightforward and everything. Some solos thrown in there, not overplay it and everything, seeing that they're trying to go for radio friendly, kind of appealing to everyone. I said sometimes at their live shows you can actually see the odd grandma in the audience because it's very family friendly type of music that they've really gone down these days. And as I said, with the most recent album, you're not even sure if you could really get that cinematic Tunisian vibe that Myrath carry. Seeing that the previous album they decided to kind of stray away. But Wilderness of Mirrors, is quite interesting. So this album's 46 minutes, 52 seconds. So prog albums, you're usually looking at about an hour mark, you know, the traditional kind of prog albums. You got 10 tracks, and yeah, for 46, 52, that's decent. As I said, usually I'm looking at the hour mark, so it is kind of short for prog. But this is the most prog metal I've heard from Myrath since them first two albums. So as I said, they've done Tales of the Sand, Legacy, Shahili, Karma, 4 albums where they've completely abandoned that prog metal aesthetic and just kind of going for mainstream radio friendly Tunisian fun vibes that they've really kind of been going with. So it seems that really stripping it out, they thought, okay, we've gone way too far now with simpling it down, and have gone massively, heavily hardcore the other way, and gone back to these proggy roots. Now, the first 2 albums, as I said, were very proggy. They had solos beyond belief, really long solos, key solos, it was heavy, and they had some Tunisian style. I said the Tunisian stuff basically came in a lot kind of heavier of recent albums. So this is more kind of a blending of the two. It's got elements of that very kind of radio friendly, very orchestral, anthemic, grand soundscape of Tunisian metal that they have gone for in recent times. But the song structuring and the way they've layered it and gone about basically composing these songs is a lot more elaborate than what they have done previously. I said the first track, The Funeral, basically kind of just tells you what this album's all about. The Funeral's one of their longer songs. You're looking at like 6 minutes. This is long compared to what their song length has been of previous albums, which you're looking at like 3-4 minutes. So 6 minutes is relatively long. And then it starts with like the band. It's like Tunisian, African kind of like singers, African kind of music. It's like weird backing vocals, then the vocalist, and then that goes for like a minute or so until the band literally actually come in. And then they come in really heavy, and I said it's got the orchestra, it's got this massive soundscape. The vocals go to a lot more kind of grit and aggression instead of clean and everything, showing the range. And then again, we've got the intro section. Then we're now at verse, which is heavy. And then you've got the backing vocals, the orchestral kind of elements, the shift in vocal delivery from clean to a lot more of an aggressive, forward kind of singing style. And then you got chorus, and then after the chorus, there's a bit of a bass solo. And then we go into the verse, but then they kind of shift the kind of instrumentation around and playing with it a bit different. Instead of going as hard this time round, they're going a bit softer now. And as I said, there's a guitar solo, kinda. I said this is a bit of the kind of miss in the beginning, which is basically while there's leads pretty much throughout the whole album, you basically got the issue of the fact that when he goes to do leads, they're not really fully fledged. It's kind of like interludes. At least to begin with, anyway. Solos start to kind of come in at the halfway mark, in my opinion. I said, Funeral, there's a lead section. It's not really doing much. It's kind of like repetitive patterns and kind of like going along with kind of the melody of the actual song itself, instead of actually going into its own actual lead. Until the end, we have a female vocalist, which is Elise Reed of Amaranth. And so this is probably their most basic song of the album. I said even though it's got the kind of leads throughout, heavy riffs and everything, So you got Elise Reed, and then you got your main vocalist and everything. You got your keys and all sorts. The kind of lead section, again, not really fully conveying solo in my mind, but still lead-ish. As I said, there's still quite a bit going on, still sounding massively grand and anthemic and all that, but just the track is a bit shorter, it's a bit more kind of straightforward and kind of like fun energies instead of The Funeral, which was like a massive soundscape of Tunisia and Africa and heavy metal and then leads and variation of vocal work and then the bass lead. They said The Funeral was just constantly evolving, as for until the end. It evolves a little bit, but it's not really the goal. The goal is basically just a really fun song. And then Breathing Near the Roar is kind of atmospheric to begin with, and then going into the heaviness again. It's again one of the more elaborate tracks, having a constantly evolving sound. Lead again, but yet again following kind of like just a typical kind of pattern, so I still call it lead interluding instead of actual soloing. The fourth track, one of the big epics of the album, Les Enfants du Soleil, which I believe is Children of the Sun, I think. It's French, either way. Not sung in the native language, it's all still English. I don't think there is any Tunisian vocals on this album. I don't think there is. But anyway, this actually starts with a child choir this time. Probably why children is in the title name. Makes sense. But again, children choir. Why not bring something else in? Again, change up the dynamics, make more creativity. Be more progressive. You are a progressive metal band, which has been forgotten for the past 4 albums, so nice to see. And then we get into heaviness again, great riffs. As I said, when it comes in heavy and everything with the riffs, it is real catchy. As I said, the vocalist is one of the best. He has an incredible voice, he has an insane range. He is incredible at delivering vocals. They are so nice and really pleasing. If you love vocals, there is no way that you're gonna basically hear him and go, yeah, it's not a good vocalist, it's not a good voice, it's not a pleasing voice. I'd find it difficult to not appreciate how good this vocalist is. Obviously everyone has different tastes and everything, and different opinions. Music is subjective at the end of the day, but this vocalist is definitely one of the ones where I believe majority is going to understand he's just fucking good. And yeah, so 6 minutes. I said you got the intro with kids, which then leads into the actual kind of song, kind of like The Funeral basically. It kind of follows that similar vibe of like the kind of like extended intro, then verse, and then change up the verse for a second time round, and then having the kind of lead interludes, and then it also kind of has an outro as well. So the song goes through different kind of stages as it progresses, and then it comes back down to the soft elements. So it kind of like starts soft and then kind of builds and rises up to the mid-section of the song, and then it starts kind of coming back down again. Just a natural rise and fall of the song. So it follows a nice kind of pattern. So it's got a decent lead to it, as I said. It doesn't follow as similar pattern as the first 3. This is where it starts kind of breaking into its own, but it doesn't really start breaking in until the next track, Still the Dawn Will Come. This has 2 lead solos, and is therefore just the best in the way of leads. I said you got the lead in the typical section, and then you got a lead at the end, but the vocalist, I believe, actually does sing over it. But hell, at least there's a solo dedicated to itself and still an outro solo. So again, it just makes the end section of the song just feel so much more alive, instead of just a guitarist kind of just blending into just the background and just going along with the music. It's like it's a living piece of itself. So the vocalist just doing his thing, and then as I said, the guitar is kind of like with the heavy riffing, and then kind of like leads kind of here and there, an interesting kind of riff that here and there, then the lead solo here, but then I'll do a kind of lead over the outro here and everything. and then the keys are doing their own thing, and violins are doing this sort of thing, and there's all sorts of other instruments everywhere else doing their own thing. It just feels huge, massively dynamic, and just absolutely alive with Tunisian energy, which is great. The 6th track, The Clown, this is probably the most musically pleasing with the melody. I said the verse of The Clown is just so nice. Said the vocal delivery is just great. The instrumentation backing up just really supports him. I said The Funeral is a grand song. Les Infas du Soleil is a grand song. The Clown, while not being as grand, it just has that melody to it and just more pleasing kind of sounds. Sometimes being more simple can create something a lot more pleasing. And so The Clown really goes for that. I think the solo for this one is actually placed towards the end, and I think it's the track where they just kind of turn the volume down. There is a track which I think it's The Clown. It might be a different one, but it's basically they just turn the volume off as the solo keeps going. I usually hate this because you can literally just hear the guitarist just going. He's just in the studio, just giving it his all, pulling all the wankery faces and everything, putting all his emotion into it, and then all the people in the kind of recording booth just turn that knob down and everything. And the guitarist is there and he's just wailing away at the guitar and everything. He's just dripping in sweat, putting so much emotion in it. And yeah, the volume's just turned off and he has no idea. Some people literally say that the guitarist is actually still in that recording studio thinking that he's actually still playing that solo. No one actually told him that they turned it off. Still there. But anyway, jokes aside, it's a darn shame. As I said, with the fact that he is a very, very talented guitarist when you hear the first 2 albums, the other 4 that come afterwards, it's like they're good solos, but you don't really fully understand how big and long his solos can be and how intricate they can be and the different variations because of the amount of time given to him on them first 2 albums. So again, with this album, even though there are leads and he is coming to the forefront, he's not really dedicating to actually doing a lead, of breaking through and doing his own thing. As I said, it's kind of like just following the melody and the rhythm and everything with the lead instead of just doing its own thing. Until, as I said, around track 5 and onwards, where he really breaks into his own. But again, it's like, don't turn the blooming volume off. Leave him be. Let's hear it. Soul of My Soul has one of the kind of biggest kind of choruses of the album. Said good leads again. Same with the rest of the tracks. I said from these tracks onwards, I think the latter half is a bit more of the typical kind of prog metal with all the solos backing up the rear of the album. I said the first half is kind of like the big prog Tunisian anthems. And then I said when you start going 5 onwards, the Tunisian shit is still kind of there, but I believe it's kind of just more of that prog metal stuff where the guitarist really starts coming in a lot more aggressively and putting in all them solos and them leads. So this is probably the best album Myrath has kind of done. So it is still a darn shame that the guitarist is really not putting himself out there in every single track and really establishing himself and kind of just playing into the song and just being a part of it instead of his own identity, which is a little irritating and infuriating. But I said, from the song structuring and just putting all these instruments together and the style and the sound and everything and how pleasing it all is, and just it's so big and huge that the creativity is just through the roof on this album. So it's always kind of been there for the previous ones, but it's so much more simplified. Where it's like it has Tunisian sounds and Tunisian kind of spoken vocals at times as well, but the musically song structure of it is still quite simplistic and following the basic principles of songs. And they said they still have a big band behind them to give that Tunisian sound and backing vocalists. But said this, they've basically used all of that and really expanded and really thought about placement, evolving the song and constantly shifting the song. So the song just keeps growing and shifting and changing, which, as I said, just brings so much life to this album. So Myrath has been called prog for the past 4 albums, and people have just been constantly saying, but they're not. And that's true, they haven't been. It is really not prog. I said it's just very mainstream Tunisian metal. As for now, you can call it yet again Tunisian prog metal, because the prog is essentially back. I said this is so prog heavy, with just how expansive it is, all the instrumentation, the placement of stuff. The child choir, the adult choir, the Tunisian instruments, violins and keys and all sorts. It's unbelievably huge to scale, and so well crafted, obviously, to take all these individuals and not have it a mess, but actually able to stick all of it together and have all of them be prominent and supporting each other. And so that shows good songwriting, musicianship, creativity to do that. So I said it is definitely one of their best albums since the first 2, which is prog. I said it just misses that more kind of fun upbeatness that Myrath has come to, and Tunisian sound, but I do believe they've kind of blended all of it together for Wilderness of Mirrors. This is pretty much just an accumulation of just everything Myrath has done through their career. This album holds all of it, so it's pretty great. It is definitely a really good album. So you can have enjoyment with previous Myrath, but this one is definitely special. So the only thing moving forward is basically just guitarists kind of like be your own individual instead of just kind of playing a similar pattern over and over again. It's just really annoying. But I said outside of that, this is a brilliant album. It's just massive, expansive, musical, creative, sonical, just huge. So, yep, definitely a great album, and I would go and get it.